So welcome to this morning session. We're going to talk about Infor's journey and how they really transform how they do security operations within their company by leveraging AWS Security Incident Response service. Throughout this talk, we're going to go through and we're going to give a little bit of a background on Infor and how Infor utilize their business in order to take care of multiple industries that they have within their ecosystem. We're going to talk through some of the challenges that Infor presented us with and some things that we had to think deeply about as far as how do we going to solve those for them. We're going to take you through the actual solution itself and the journey that it took for us to be able to get there. And then we're going to wrap up with talking about some of the things that we did and as a result of learning about Infor's journey, how that kind of helped us shape the Security Incident Response service. I'm going to walk you through a demonstration of how one of the attack patterns that we're able to detect from GuardDuty or one of your other detection tools, and how we can use that to be able to triage, to be able to get to true intelligence for you. And then lastly, we're going to wrap up with some questions, and kind of like in a panel type of discussion, and kind of talk about what's next for the service and what next for security operations as a whole. So with me here, two of my esteemed colleagues. So Miona, she's the CISO for Infor, and also Hart, Security Vice President here at AWS. They are quite more fashion forward than I am, so enjoy the actual presentation. Miona.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, we are fashion forward. We went shopping on Amazon the same night, the same shirts. So what is Infor? Infor is an industry-specific, AI-driven cloud application. And so what does that really mean? And what it really means is that we are built of several ERP systems that are specific to industries that deal with very complex operating environments. Let me give you an example. Aston Martin, that is a cool product. And what Infor does, it allows Aston Martin to actually specify what color thread it wants in the car and to have it in each car as it's manufactured. So that's the unique requirements that our customers have, is what specifically needs to be in each product, and it builds out and lets them operate. What's really cool is that we have built our platform on AWS. We use hundreds of AWS services, of which lets us represent with our customers the business intelligence and the security that only Infor can offer.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and so when I think about Infor is involved in a multitude of different industries. And so when they came to us and stated that given the scope, given the fact that they are a platform that's not, built and then shifted to AWS, but they actually built into AWS, we had to think deeply about how to solve some of their challenges. One of the things you think about is, when we think about findings, when you think about some of your detection tooling, oftentimes they are going to alert you on things that are maybe a low risk type of thing, or it may be a critical type of finding. But oftentimes it's all mushed into one. And so they came to us and said, hey, how do I get to the point where I can make real intelligent decisions based off the findings that I'm getting, whether that be from one of my detection tools within AWS Cloud, or maybe it's from my EDR solution that I'm hosting here within my ecosystem. And so we had to solve for that particular challenge. The second piece was, when something does arrive, when something does alert me, how does my security team, my managed security service provider, and my vendor all work together in one particular environment, so the way we can information share and we can work together to be able to get to the actual root of the problem. And then lastly is, which is a challenge that most customers face with, is, well, how do I maintain the right level of expertise to be able to do incident response in the cloud environment? AWS has over 300 services. And so it's very challenging to hire security professionals that have that breadth of knowledge across all those particular services. And so we came up with a way to be able to do so. And so looking into those three buckets, we decided that we needed to get more proactive and not just think about the response element of security operations, but how do we get left of bang? And so we started looking at, first, how about we start ingesting all of your GuardDuty findings? and all of your third-party findings that can be integrated into Security Hub. Infor took it a step further, and they partnered with us to be able to build connectors to bring in findings from their Defender environment. They was able to bring in findings from CrowdStrike, which currently, at the time, was not integrated into Security Hub. And so we was able to bring in those findings, be able to start enriching those, and then be able to get to a point where now we can triage. Now I understand your environment. Now I understand how you normally will operate. And so now we begin to triage those things to be able to reduce some of the noise. Yona explained about how large of an enterprise that they operate at. So we wasn't talking about 5 or 6 findings. We wasn't talking about 2 or 3 accounts. We were talking about a large estate of real estate that one small security team could not be able to triage in a timely fashion the way that they wanted to. And so when we look at that, we decided that, well, once we get to the point of ingestion, we can triage, we can be able to make intelligent decisions about what's important or not. Now we investigate the rest. And so those investigations have gone down from the point of taking days to be able to get to an investigation or hours to now we can investigate within minutes. We were able to take Infor from the point of having a finding be maybe a day or so old to now that finding is actually raised within maybe minutes if it's something that requires their attention. And then lastly is, well, how do we escalate appropriately, right? How do we make sure that we notify the customer of a event that we can't make a determination on, and it's an event that we can't make the determination that this is a false positive or it's a finding that's not really important based on the activity that's taking place in the environment, and then we can escalate those urgently to them. So I mentioned that I was going to walk you through an actual attack pattern that's very common amongst GuardDuty, and that's the DNS data exfiltration. Now, there are multiple reasons why this finding may pop. Not all of those are malicious in nature. Some of those are depending on what you're doing with inside your particular ecosystem. So Infor has GuardDuty enabled. They have these findings that comes in, and those findings will be able to be realized within AWS GuardDuty, right? GuardDuty will take those findings, they present those to you in a dashboard form. You can have alerting mechanisms based off of those, based off of whatever your settings happen to be. But then Infor onboarded to AWS Security Incident Response. So now we're taking those findings and we actually send those through an event bridge connection that actually allows those findings to come into us, to our environment. And when it comes into us, now we have the triage responsibility aligned within AWS. And so we take those, we send those through a number of automations that allow us to be able to take in the GuardDuty finding, and then we're able to take a look at the EDR solution finding to be able to not just look at that finding in a vacuum by itself, but we'll be able to start taking a look at different telemetry from other areas of your ecosystem to be able to let us know if that finding is actually a true positive, or if it should be investigated, or maybe it's a actual event that's taking place that we need to start doing incident response actions for. So because this is inside of the Security Incident Response service, now we're able to utilize the information that we have learned from the environment. We're able to triage. We're able to now use some of the responder intelligent processes that's through a number of scripts to be able to see maybe this alert triggered because of a pen test that's taking place. Maybe this alert triggered because there's a mergers and acquisitions process taking place. We get that information back from the customer, and we're able to feed that into the logic to be able to make intelligent decisions off of it. When we get done with that, a responder, an actual human, is going to look at these findings and determine if the logic could not make a determination on its own based off what we know about the customer's environment. If the human has to take a look at it, now they have 2 decisions to make. One decision is, do I create a suppression logic where I can suppress that finding because I recognize what the customer is going through? Infor has already outlined what's taking place within their environment. They let us know on the 3rd Wednesday of every quarter, they're going to be conducting these particular actions. And we're able to use that to create the right suppression logic. But in the event that we can't, at that point, then we escalate to the customer. We escalate to Infor, we let them know this right here is an event that we would like for you to validate if this is expected behavior. If it is expected behavior, we go back to the previous step of creating the suppression logic. If not, then we kick off a security investigation. Now, although during this time period, now we have reduced from, let's say, thousands of findings. Now we're down to maybe 2 or 3 findings that we actually escalate to the customer. That's a lot more time for Infor to be able to focus in on the primary core parts of their business. We took this feedback. We've been able to enhance the service even further than what we had already provided. And so working with partners and customers like Infor, we've been able to launch this past year, we've launched a number of different enhancements, and these 6 are just a few, where we're now integrating Agentic AI into incident response. This is automatically. The moment Infor opens up a case with us now, there's going to be an agent that's going to run, that's going to provide them with some key recommendations and some starting points in order where to look for. They're going to include some log extractions to be able to highlight places for them to be able to start their investigation. All the while, a security professional within AWS is actually going to be checking into that case to be able to view those same results from the AI agent and to be able to talk back and forth together so the way we truly partner on the security operations journey with customers. Then we look at how we adjusted with pricing. We recognize that the service needs to scale with the customer's business. And so we changed our approach from it being a static entry point to now an immediate approach. So that way, as your business grows, then your pricing will adjust with you. We look at the number of times that we communicate to the customer. There's a bunch of automation that takes place where the service will communicate with you. But then there's also a number of times where you don't want necessarily that particular communication to come your direction. And so you're able to filter those things out. Certifications are important for a lot of our customers. Infor is included in that. And so we had to focus in on the most important certifications up front, which was high trust, and then we continue to build up on that. So be on the lookout for additional launches of new certification that the service have been agreed upon. And then the ITSM integrations. Big feedback that we got from Infor and others about wanting to use your existing ITSM and your ticket management systems to be able to integrate into the security incident response service. And then lastly is being able to not just have to onboard an entire organization, but now we allow you to onboard at the OU level within that particular service. So we've taken all this feedback, we've integrated all these enhancements, and we got the results back from Infor. So we started off with this journey with Infor having this large estate of AWS accounts. And of course, with an estate that large, you have a lot of endpoints, you have a lot of systems, you have a lot of applications that's involved within your environment. We're able to take all those in, triage those particular findings, and then be able to see some real gains from that. So when you think about a typical security operations team who are going through manually investigating each one of their findings that come up, we're able to save a lot of time in their cycles. And so now her team is able to really respond to and actually focus in on harder problems that humans should be dealing with today. Because the automation, the technology is doing a lot of that triage and a lot of that tier 1 work for them on their behalf. And so even when we get down to the number of cases that 1% that was investigated and that 0.03 that was actually escalated, they were all expected patterns of behavior. These were pen tests that was taking place. These were activities and game days that the customer were doing that we didn't have any knowledge of, but we were able to find this pattern, find this activity, and escalate to them in a timely fashion. And so that, I think, in its own was a huge win for you and your team, and to be able to allow your team to get back some of those hours in the day to be able to focus in on harder problems. One of the last things that I do want to discuss is I do want to talk about the security incident response AI agent. There have been a lot of energy, a lot of excitement about agentic AI in a lot of places. One of the places that we felt super deeply about was how do we do this in a security incident response environment? Like, what does AI agents look like in IR? If you think about, most threat actors and most actors, they have always tried to use what used to be used as admin tools against the actual organization. And so what we figured was we can use an AI agent to help us with this particular problem. And so as we think about attack patterns being more sophisticated, as we think about the speed at which attacks are going forth these days, we're really at a point now where Agentic AI is the only way for us to keep up with this particular pattern. And so we've incorporated that deeply. Today, you can go into Security Incident Response console, open up a case with AWS, and based off of the information that you provided in that particular case, the AI agent will start running on your behalf immediately and start going through your cloud trail. It will begin to start looking at areas within your environment that's aligned with that particular attack pattern. And even if it finds things that are maybe that you didn't call out, it will tell you, hey, this right here is also something that I've seen that could be an area of concern that you might want to take a look at and provide you with recommendations on that. And so we're super excited about Security Response, the AI agent. It is not something that has to be enabled. It comes by default to customers when they're in there. And so we've been able to utilize that here today with Infor on a couple of their cases, and we've really got some interesting results back from those that really opened our eyes up on some things that some points that we could start with our investigations. So really would like to go in and kind of talk through recent journey with Infor. Maybe a couple of weeks ago, we had an opportunity to work closely together just to really understand how we think about pen testing in our environments and how we think about when we're doing testing in game days and we're running through challenging our security teams to kind of exercise their response capability. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, couple of things. When you look at the metrics of what we've done, first of all, before we got the results, I had anxiety, and that was because I was like, I don't know what the results are going to share.
Yeah.
And so one of the gentlemen that reports to me, he called and told me, he sent me a message on that Saturday, and I was like, are we okay? Are we okay? And we were okay.
Yeah.
So I always remember that and that special call that we were okay. But the thing is, we did find some things, and what we found were actually results that had generated from pen testers. So we do a lot of pen testing because of all our products. We have 200 products in our multi-tenant environment. We have regulatory requirements for pen testing, and so we do actually allow for pen testing. And with that, I was so proud that the technology found it. Likewise, we had another pen testing type of situation, which we saw, and I, instantly initiated the process, which was great for letting us test the environment. And it was within seconds that AWS was able to just totally look at everything and let us know we're comfortable in what it was. And so really appreciate the speed of execution. And I just have to go back to when we started. I think to me, what I saw, we flipped a switch and it was on. I'm sure there was more than that in the background. But it did enable us to actually scale across a very large environment. And so we're 77% overseas. And with that, we work with many different companies and have strong name recognition overseas about what we provide. And to be able to know within a moment that we're okay is great. And then this the investigation tool, that's really exciting. I hope, I'm going to have to trust you, that I will never have to read or write another playbook as long as I live.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. So one of the things that Demian is talking about is the moment that you enable the service, we begin triaging your findings right away. And so when they, virtually flip the switch to turn on, her concern levels was very up to find out what was going to be found. There have been times where we have worked with customers. We have been brought into particular cases for one issue. And we've noticed that there has actually been activity in this environment for months. And by months, I mean multiple months of time. And so you don't know sometimes what you don't know. And Infor had a very clean environment, but you never know until somebody looks underneath your hood, kind of what your carburetor really looks like, right? And maybe carburetor's too much of a.
Well, I heard
well,
I
yeah.
heard about an
Yeah.
instance where you turned it on and there had been an actor 6 months in the environment, and I was like, oh no, that can't be us.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
It was not. No, it was not. Yeah. Yeah. So Hart, how are you thinking about this from a senior level?
Yeah, there's a few things going on here. First of all, super excited to have the 1-year anniversary of the service.
Yes.
We've had early adopters like Mignana and Infor and many others. One of the things that I love that's played out, and we haven't emphasized it a lot yet, but maybe we can now, is this idea that it's a team sport. It's not just AWS and Infor in this case, but we've got CrowdStrike, we've got other partners, right, who are deeply embedded with the customer, providing MDR, providing incident response and other things. And it's really incumbent upon us as defenders to make sure that the adversary doesn't have any unnatural advantage.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways we do that is by bringing the best and the brightest together, right? And to provide that active defense. And so I know, Mignana, when we were first talking to you, having the ability to work with your existing partners was so critical. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so because we're everywhere, we have a lot of partners, and with that, it's not only just what we see in AWS, but it's also with CrowdStrike and Defender. We run both of them, and then we have a lot of other add-on tools that we run just to the layered defense type of process. But to me, if I just look at it, we've got the powerhouse of what you see, what AWS sees, which I asked you a while ago, how much of the internet do you cover? In 2019, it was 1/3, and I don't know if you have an up-to-date number on that, but so AWS is out there pretty much hitting a large part of the internet, so you're going to see things. And then CrowdStrike's going to see data from a different lens, and then Defender's going to see it from a different lens, and you take all that and you glue it together. It helps you have comfort in what you see to know that it's really valid.
Absolutely. And then the other thing I like, particularly about our relationship, is that you've been very active in paying that forward to your customers and your partners, right? And so you've been able to explain that sort of value proposition that working with Infor on top of AWS with this whole security ecosystem at your disposal really is a benefit to your customers and partners.
Yeah, so if you think about the standard ERP customer, and I'm going to go back. So my entire career, when you join a company, you get put on an ERP rollout assignment. And usually the people who are running the assignments are not your security people. It's more project managers, business operations, and then there's the CFO who pays the check. And so you have to talk and communicate the value, what you're doing to these audiences, and then it goes to the board because they're paying the check. So this gives us a chance now to share with them a really scalable solution, or our partners, so when they talk to their customers or when they are having the interactions to sell, they're not selling to security people, but they're selling to audiences that want to know that we're secure because they read what's in the media, and that's the lens of what they've got from security, what is in the news, or what an auditor has shared, or what is a regulatory requirement. So we give them the information that they need to know for 3 pillars, but more importantly, is what is in the news, and that's where the frantic happens. Can this happen to us? And so when the can this happen to us comes about, we now say we've got this, I call them the powerhouses, CrowdStrike, AWS, Defender. You've got these large companies that are watching everything that's happening, and they're responding instantaneously when something happens, and we've got all of that looking at our environment. I mean, I had to just go to my standard language. How cool is that?
Absolutely. And it's super fun to be part of that journey with you and your customers and your partners. The other thing I'm super excited about, Lindsay, as you mentioned, is the agentic workflows that we're exposing to customers now. I know you talked through in depth. It's the tip of the iceberg, right? And one of the things we're seeing very early on is that the more we can do to reduce undifferentiated heavy lifting, the more we can do to speed up an investigation, right? And reduce the time to value or security value there, the better off we are for everybody, right? To go from a bump in the night to everything's all right as quickly as possible is really the name of the game. And Agentic AI, generative AI is an absolute game changer there for us.
Absolute game changer. And we're seeing it in multiple different aspects. We use it internal as well. We just have now been able to expose it to customers. But we try to start with AI in-house? And how can we do that where we're not putting more pressure on the cognitive load of the incident responders? And how do we alleviate some of that, right? So our response teams, our engineering teams, our product teams, like they all work together in order to be able to produce the best possible product. And we try to do that first using AI. I try to use AI at least once a day now because I've seen so much benefits from it. And I'm coming from being a traditional security person, start off being a traditional IT administrator, right? Where I felt like I had to do everything myself. That now, because of AI, like the API calls, the way that's able to integrate, especially with a lot of our authentication systems to be able to develop some of these nice enhancements to enable us to conduct incident response a lot faster. It is an absolute game changer, the way we're able to incorporate AI now into security operations.
Absolutely. And just maybe to add a little bit of that, one of the things that I've been really impressed with is the way that our threat research folks have embraced agentic AIs, right? So using Kiro, I've watched that team, go from an old model of maybe whiteboarding something, looking at some data, getting, kind of a war room collaboration mentality together, to now, getting a data point, going right into Kiro and using a natural language prompt to, really spec out what it might look like to create a detector, to create a mitigation strategy, right? And then either use that to feed into the service teams to go do the work, or actually go right from the spec in Kiro into proof of concept code. And so again, like reducing the undifferentiated heavy lifting, increasing collaboration, speed to resolution is kind of unheard of, right? And it was a quick changeover, right? It's not like they spent weeks and months trying to learn the technology. It's like literally within an hour or two. Like they went from, hey, I've got this idea, let me try doing a natural language prompt. Oh my goodness, it actually worked. Okay, let me look at the spec.
Yeah.
Okay, now let me decide the next action. It's just mind-bogglingly cool.
You bring up Kiro. Kiro is very interesting. I used Kiro last week before I came to re:Invent. I had an indication, IOC that I had from one customer, and I was interested to see if another responder had identified a similar IOC. And so I threw it into Kiro and told it to look at my resolver group, to look at my particular ticketing queue, and look for this IOC anywhere else in the environment. And it gave me back a summarization of the number of times that this IOC have been seen and what that IOC could have been doing throughout the environment. It gave me a full write-up on it. And I was able to use that, talk to my team, and they thought I was a genius at first. So I told them it was Kiro. But it really allowed us to move faster to be able to make a decision on how we wanted to address that particular IOC. So instead of looking at it in the vacuum, we were able to actually put a block in place widespread, so the way that we could prevent that action going forward, and working with the service teams, working with our threat intelligence groups to be able to get that information out to the public faster.
Let me ask you a question since I'm absorbing this right now. So if we have a finding, can we use Kiro against that finding to see if it's somewhere else as well? Or
Depending on how you have your MCPs. So we have MCP servers that are set up that I built specifically looking at my ticket queue. So you can create a MCP server internal to have it start scurfing through the rest of your environment that's not covered by us, because we're going to do it for you on your behalf for those that are.
I'm all about copying what you do.
You are. So we're going to do that on your behalf. But if you would like to do it SEPCOR, you absolutely can.
Now, it just sounds intriguing to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of questions, Mignana, I prepared a few ahead of time, and I hope it's okay with you and Lindsay if I ask you a couple of them.
Yeah.
So the first question is, I want to go back to this idea of a team sport. And so for you and Lindsay, how are these multifaceted security partnerships preparing you for opportunities maybe as far out as 2030? How are investing in those relationships now, you think, going to pay off in the future?
Yeah, I can start us off. For me, the way we think about our partnerships is we look at it as threat actors work together, right? Like you've seen in a number of public cases where you have a threat actor get into an environment, they actually bought the credentials from another threat actor, and then there's another threat actor that's handling the payment processing systems, right? And so we got this notion that we can't do security by ourselves. And so we bring in partners, we bring in other solutions, and we have regular interactions with one another in order to test out these flywheels, right? So how do I feed information to a partner? How do I receive information from a partner? And then how do we work together? And so when we think about 2030, right, like we can't do security the same way that we're doing it today. And so we're always leveraging what is the next ridge line that we have to cross, right? What happens if we had a situation where we had to do incident response across 20,000 accounts, right? How do we do that at scale? And how do we do that at a tempo that can still be at the right pace, that we don't cause any harm to the actual customers or to other businesses? And so what we've been looking at is, security used to be a back office function. Security now is a core process within most businesses where we have to have a seat at the table to understand where the business is going. And so as businesses are starting to go towards open source, using open source technology, as businesses are looking to leverage more Bedrock and other services, we can't be behind in finding out how to secure these particular products. And so for us, I would say that what we're looking to integrate more within the businesses, within our particular areas, like marketing, whether that be product teams, so the way that we can move with the business instead of being blockers, being perceived as being blockers, or being late to the party as it relates to the new technology.
Yeah. So I want to pick up on a phrase I heard this morning about we're no longer about the badges we wear. And so we become one team. And I was listening to what she was thinking and what, I give thoughts about 2030. That's coming up pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And I think about what's happened over the past 30 years I've been doing this, and I'm doing some of the same things I've been doing over the past 30 years. And I'd love to see that go away, and I really see what some of the stuff you're doing with Amazon Q and others, like, will hopefully, and you nod your head, yes, okay. Definitely. We won't have to use the word scanning anymore or password management.
Right.
So we remove the processes of what we traditionally know security to be, and to your point about working closer with the business, then we can enable security from a different lens on how we operate in a company to help it make more money, become more efficient, but do it in a secured way. Because the security then becomes codified. And so it's removing all the mundane tasks. So it's like, if you think about scanning and vulnerability management, it's kind of like writing lines in elementary school. I will not sleep in class. I will not sleep in class. I will not sleep in class. Yeah. Our life has become that with some of the processes that we have to do. So I see us overcoming all of that, overcoming all the metrics and all the data collection, instead enabling growth.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
That's super awesome. Also, as we're talking about it, I think of your point about Amazon, supporting a large swath of the internet, and it's a responsibility we take very seriously, and we've got a lot of focus on how to stay resilient, how to stay secure, how to stay safe. It's not just the terrestrial internet anymore, right? And so now we're talking about space. And the very real possibility of interplanetary communications, right, in our lifetime. And so thinking about the ability to do that as well, right? When you think about disconnected or forward deployed systems like an oil well or a tanker that is very hard to reach. Well, once you've got a satellite up in the sky, it's impossible to kind of recall it for a patch or to investigate an adversary that might be poking around inside it. And so, taking services like the Security Incident Response Service, the relationships we're investing in today with customers and partners like yourself, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, and others, and thinking about, how do we ensure that we can provide the safest computing environment for our customers, no matter how far out they want to go, right, to space and beyond, is really a top priority when you think about what we need to be investing in today to realize that in 2027 or 2030, right, which, as you point out, it's not too far away.
It's like 4 years away.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Pretty close.
You need to give us a stretch goal.
So another question I was kind of curious about, both of you are big tenured leaders in the security space. What are you doing to invest in the security culture that allows your responders and engineers to innovate fearlessly?
So security culture is a big thing for us, and it's not just within our company. It's actually working with you guys and working with our customers as well. It's a couple of things that we've done. We've actually built what's called a security board. It has 9 senior leaders that represent the development community of our organization. And so what we're doing is starting to unify the knowledge sharing across the developers, because you've learned the magic of if you go as a security practitioner, and we've done this in the past, and we know the answers to all the questions, and we go in and say you can and cannot do this. But instead, you leverage those who create the technology and the thoughts and processes of what they have. Then magic starts evolving in a different way because they don't have the legacy thought processes in place. So we've done that. Security board, working with the product groups, and then we built also what's called a security exchange. And so the security exchange is we bring in different people within the company. You don't have to be a security person, but someone has an interest in contributing. And the objective is, it's kind of like at AWS when you had a Slack channel where you exchange ideas. And you exchange ideas, but when a threat comes up, you show it, everyone goes and checks their environment out. But also if you have a question about how to do something, you go and ask the question, or you want to ideate on a way to look forward. Right. And so by embracing and bringing others into the content, you see a richness that comes out, because we're no longer just the security group. The security is the organization. And I think the last thing is our marketing team and communications team, who's present today with us, have put security in almost everything that they talk about. And so I want to embrace, the word security, because it is on top of every company's mind. And so we are using it to a marketing advantage, letting companies know that we are doing it. So our culture is us and how we operating with you guys, and then operating with our customers. And we do have 90,000 customers worldwide.
That's awesome.
Nice.
That's
awesome. Yeah, I think about security similar to you, Miona. I think about everyone being involved in security. So when we think about service teams, when we think about product teams, when we think about folks that work in business intelligence, there's a security component to everyone's business. We need our customers, we need our employees, we need our users to have a security mindset, because that is sometimes one of the easiest entry points into someone's ecosystem, is by sending out the phishing email, sending out the spear phishing campaign, doing the social engineering activities. I know that sometimes these sound like legacy activities, but these are very effective techniques and strategies that's being used and deployed. And so we think about that deeply. And so everyone has to have a security-focused mindset. And so we took it a step further. We have security champions. We have one of our colleagues created a scouts program of professionals who are really champions behind security within the organization. So sometimes these are hero people who look around corners in a different way that maybe the security team don't necessarily see, but they're embedded within other lines of business throughout the company. And so we've seen a lot of value from that, because when they are champions, when they are part of the Scouts program, they have a different lens that they're looking at, and they're able to tap their colleague and say, hey, you don't have the right auth attached to that, right? Or you don't have any auth attached to that. Hey, we need to fix that, right? Or hey, how about we not deploy that code until we get application security review on it? And so we've seen that be really transformed when we think about the culture of security. And lastly is, we really love escalating. I can't speak without saying the word escalate at least 2 or 3 times throughout a particular point. But it's truly built into the fabric and built into the DNA that there's no hesitation, there's no fear in escalating. I think the best thing about it is whenever we have the opportunity to escalate, one of the first responses that I hear from leaders is thank you. Thank you for bringing me in. Thank you for urgently bringing this to my attention. And then the next question is, well, what can I do? How can I help, right? Like they want an action to do to be able to help out with that particular use case. And for me, that's pretty enriching. And I think that's a great way to have a good culture.
A wise man once said, don't hesitate to escalate. That wise man might be on stage with us today, actually. And right up there, right, is we've got other great sayings that kick around the company. We've got one character on the team, Paco, who has this idea that security exceptions require exceptional security, right? And so if we're going to do hard things, it's an opportunity to raise the bar for the way we do security around them, right? And all of that for me, listening to some of your wise words, Lindsay and others, is this idea that to have a strong security culture, you have to groom it, you have to garden it, right? And you've got to be a student of the culture to learn about the way things are working today and how they're working and why. And if you're gonna have a strong security culture, you've got to understand the corporate culture itself and how they dovetail in. And then you've got to be a student of the culture. You've got to be an advocate, right? You've got to be a thought leader, all right, as Mignana and Lindsay have sort of chatted about today. And then you've got to put on your builder hat and say, the security culture today may not be the security culture of tomorrow.
Right.
And what can I do, regardless of where I am in the organization, to build that right culture, to build that right mental model so that others can innovate and achieve what maybe they didn't think was possible. And Mignana, you mentioned that directly. It's like, let's stop focusing on necessarily some of the guardrails and let's focus on the opportunities that present themselves, right? And so having that kind of student, steward, builder mindset as we're talking about security culture, I think is just so powerful, right? And you don't have to be the CISO to be able to do that, right?
Right.
Anybody can build security culture, right, from anywhere in the org. And for me, that's like what I want to see more of in the future for all of our customers and partners.
100%.
Sure. So I guess in that same vein, how do you see your security strategies today allowing you to more comfortably adopt agentic AI and generative AI in the core business? So not necessarily security applications, but by doing some of the things we're talking about in security from your strategic standpoint, how are you unlocking opportunities for the business to go do interesting things with agentic and Gen AI?
So, we're unlocking it for our customers as well.
Yeah.
So it's in our platform. We have what's called Velocity Suite, and it's a set of modules that you get with our product that actually shows how to do process mining or other things that help companies operate more efficiently and make more money and create their competitive advantage on growing. So in our company, what we're doing is we're taking the same training our developers are taking and all the others because we want to think like our customers think. And so we're looking at it on how we can actually enable growth and efficiency. And efficiency, I cannot get past that because there's so much stuff that we just waste time on every day. And this is going to help us just get off to where we are not thinking about that. And then we get into another realm of creative thinking and start using our critical judgment. And we get back to where we were, when we were in our youth about thinking about how to do things, and then growth is going to just expand on ideas.
Yeah. One of the ways I think about that is it's a little bit different because I'm not thinking about it from a financial standpoint. I'm wondering about it from a time perspective, right? Like, you mentioned about like not doing some of those smaller tasks. And I think back on when we try to create, and we're a very data-rich organization, right? And so the amount of data that we have to kind of get through to try to make sense of based off of the conversation that we're having and based on what we need, I think one of the ways we can do that is by being more transparent, really, in the use of AI and responsible use of AI. And so when we think about that, we think about it from the standpoint of, well, we have the technology that's been authorized, right? We've gone through the right security controls to make sure that that the right information can be presented to the right authorized user. It's being transparent when we use those things. And so I think about when we go through our business reviews, there are times where I will, tell that, hey, this particular presentation that you're seeing right now was actually created by Kiro. Or I have the right attachments, built in within my web browser that if I'm on a particular web page, I can ask questions to Amazon Q in real time to be able to get me information that I need, that maybe the page is too rich, maybe it's too much information, and I need to quickly get to a decision. And I'm able to ask Amazon Q right there on the spot. And so when I think about those type of APIs and I think about the integration with a lot of our AI tooling, I think that's the best way to get more usage and more adoption, I think, throughout the company and the organization. It's been truly phenomenal.
Awesome. So we're running up against time here. Last question.
Okay.
Simple one. Future of security incident response. All right.
You said a simple question?
Simple question. So just a couple of thoughts on where that space is going.
Okay, I got it. So I think that I foresee incident response being a race against time. I foresee more threat actors deploying. They're already deploying scripts, right? A lot of threat actors are using scripts as their uses. Matter of fact, it might be a threat actor or two out here too. So threat actors use scripts in order to form some of their attacks. But I foresee that threat actors are going to start using some of these AI models to continuously run some of these attacks, and not just in the DDoS type of perspective, right? Where attacks are going to be able to adjust to your defense mechanisms. So if you think about how we do security operations and defense in a traditional environment, those would not be effective against an AI attack. We're going to need AI to defend against an AI particular attack. And so I see that threat actors will be more shape-shifting, where they're going to be looking for other pivot points in real time and not a human. I'm talking about the AI agent, where they're going to continuously, as you begin to start blocking some of these protocols, you begin to start blocking ports and things of that nature, they're going to really continue to transform and continue to adjust to the defensive posture, right? We've been talking a lot about supply chain attacks of that nature, right? Like we got to get into the point of like supply chain defense, where we are constantly meeting the demands of the future, using AI and leveraging that within our environments and our ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right.
So I just kind of envision we really don't need a SOC anymore in the future.
Hear to that.
Yeah. And I keep asking the question, like, why don't we use the same ticketing system that our IT team uses or our developers use? Because if you look at a company, each group has their own ticketing system, each group has their own way to handle what we used to call it problem tracking, troubleshooting, whatever. Instead, it should just morph into one thing. If you have something that happens that's not normal, then there's a process that's automated to address it. So how do we get to that process to automate to address it? And then that's where the thought processes come in, because when it's not normal, that means it's gone through all the AI analysis, and it means that something really weird's happening. And I think the most awakening process was I was listening to how Amazon handles incident response. So you don't have an L1 and L2 anymore, because if something abnormal happens or something strange or different or whatever, a ticket's automatically generated to the owner of that transaction, and that person then researches it, and then only the L3 type of activity comes to the person.
Right.
And so, or the responder, or whatever you want to call it. Now I see that L3 activity going to a support team. And how do we start then scaling down the support team? Because again, there's a lot of synergy in these processes, and we talked about it in the data center days of fusion centers. You have security monitoring, you have your data center monitoring, you've got all these different, your physical security group monitoring, bringing it all into one screen that you look at. So, that be our next step.
Plus one, and then I'll just toss a small idea out there. One of the trends I see kind of emerging is hyper-specialization or personalization. And so today you might have a centralized investigative chatbot or AI that all the responders are working with. In the future, I think one very real possibility is they'll each have their own individualized bot that's trained on their research methodology, their case data, their courses of action, right? Maybe some of their public speaking, so it has a little bit of an understanding of their philosophy or approach. And so they can get much faster outcomes in the style and manner in which they have expertise, right? We're already seeing that today. A lot of public speakers have basically a speaker bot where it has, all their YouTube, all their scripts, everything. And now for the new topic, you say, write me a speech, like this other one I did, but on this new topic, and it, kind of generates it for them. And so I see the same thing happen for responders. A lot of hyper-specialization, a lot of personalization.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I cannot think about that from a bot of bots. You could have a really an agent of agents, I think is what we talked about. And that's similar to what we're talking about there. That's really fantastic.
But could I have a holographic figure deliver the speech for me then?
That'd be even better, right?
Well, the holographic image would not be so fashion forward as you are right now, so I think that would be one of our
Or a
biggest
robot
challenges.
then.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that we do want to offer is ability for everyone who wants to continue on their cloud journey If you want to elevate kind of your knowledge and take a couple of courses within AWS Skill Builder, you can get access to the security, identity, and compliance area to learn more about security operations and how to do that within the cloud. I do want to take this moment though and thank you, Emiliano Cote, for your time, for your attendance here on stage, sir. Appreciate you and the valuable questions that you asked. Those were hard. You said like the easy questions that was going to be asked, but thank you for your insight and thought leadership. If you do have any questions for us, because it's a silent session, we can't do a live Q&A. But please catch us outside the doors of this particular room and be able to answer any questions that you all may have. With that being said, thank you all for your time.
Cool. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Mignana.